To all those people watching, I would like to remind everyone that this video is not made strictly for kids. It is for older fans and adults too. Enjoy the fucking video! This video is brought to you by my loyal patrons. Register now at any tier to watch new videos 1 month in advance before they're made public. Link is in the description. The Sodor government had launched a new trial, e-scooters in some towns around parts of the island. All you need to do is scan the QR code, pop on a helmet, and off you go, beamed the government minister cheerfully to the camera. But not everyone was impressed.
E-scooters, pah!
Snorted George the steamroller. What's wrong with cars or buses?
Beats me, George, replied his driver. I hate those things too. They're always in the way when people are done with them. Perhaps the trial won't be that much of a success with that problem.
But George's driver's prediction for the trial would later turn out to be wrong. The trial was successful, and more of the e-scooters began to show up in other places. Whenever George came around a bend in the road, he would often see one of the scooters dumped on the side.
Oh, who put that there?
He growled. His driver got down and moved it himself.
No respectable person would ever leave that rubbish laying down on the road,
he huffed as he steamed away. It wasn't George and his driver who detested the scooters. Some people had gone as far as throwing them into the water to get them out of the way. George and his driver thought it was funny and were glad that not everyone was on board with the idea. One day, George was making his way to mend a road. He then saw another scooter nearby, and he remembered what he and his driver had seen previously.
Oops!
George and his driver laughed. But little did they realize that the scooter they pushed had landed right on the railway line, and coming towards it were Pip and Emma with a return express from London. Emma was leading the train back to Tidmouth. She and Pip were happy as they were running to time, and the journey was going smoothly. "What a wonderful day, isn't it, Pip?" she called. But before Pip could reply, Emma could see the scooter ahead. "Oh no!" she squealed. Her driver saw it too and applied her brakes hard. But it was too late. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" shouted Emma unhappily as she came to a stop. "Who left that rubbish there?" she added, fuming. An inspector arrived on board Henry. He then looked over Emma and told her that she could not carry on with her journey and needed to get to the works to be fixed. Emma parked herself sadly into a siding to wait for an engine to take her there. While Henry took her and Pip back to Tidmouth. Later that day, George was resting after laying down some tarmac. His driver was reading the Sodor Times on his phone, scrolling through the day's news, when suddenly he saw the story about Emma and the destroyed scooter, and realized where it was.
"Oh no,"
he quivered.
"Oh no what?"
asked George. Then his driver showed him the news story. George's face fell.
"We must never speak a word of this,"
he murmured. George knew that the accident was his fault, but he didn't want to admit it to Miss Jenny. He feared that his roller might get taken away again. So his driver agreed with the idea. But he began to have an awful sinking sensation. He thought something might be wrong with his boiler. So Miss Jenny checked him over. "Nothing seems to be wrong with you, George," she said after she'd finished. But George still had that feeling. "I'll get Buster to do your work," she said, smiling. "You have a rest." But George still had that uncomfortable feeling inside him and couldn't understand what it was. "Guilt," said his driver.
Guilt? About what?
George asked, puzzled.
The scooter,
replied his driver.
Oh, right,
sighed George.
I didn't mean to hurt anyone,
he pressed on sadly.
I've caused trouble before, but this was honestly an accident.
So it was you, replied Miss Jenny, as she returned to the yard to see George, looking cross.
And mine as well,
added the driver, and explained their situation. George looked towards his roller in guilt. You do realise that both of you cost the scooter company and the railway for the damage you had caused?
I know, Miss Jenny, replied George quietly. I've made another mess, but this time it was an accident. I never meant to hurt anyone.
You don't exactly have the best track record when it comes to trust. But you hadn't done any trouble recently since pulling Winston on the road, so your roller is not going to be taken away, George.
It's not?
Gasped George. No, replied Miss Jenny, smiling. I'm happy to see that you have admitted your faults, but you're going to work twice as hard to pay back the money that I'll be spending on the damages.
Yes, Mom,
replied George, feeling quite relieved. So Miss Jenny rang the Fat Controller and the scooter company about the whole story. And, as George agreed to, he had worked twice as hard to pay back the damage. You make a mother proud, George, said Miss Jenny one night in the yard. We're only halfway to paying up the damages. I understand you and your driver's disdain for those scooter things, but it might come in handy one day, she winked as she made her way home. The next day, George was making his way to mend a road at Sodor. They came towards the downward slope of a hill that leads to the station. George's driver usually slows him down here, but today it was different. George's driver gazed out towards the views at the seaside as he spotted a tugboat taking sightseers along the coast in the distance. He then saw the hill and was shocked. They went down the slope very fast. His driver tried his best to stop until they smashed through a fence and crashed into the station platform. Ouch! Cried George. Luckily, no one was hurt. His driver got down and inspected the damage after shutting off George's steam. He was searching for his phone to call for help, but...
Oh no, I forgot my phone. Just what were you thinking, driver?
George said crossly.
Where was your head at?
But before his driver replied, he spotted a scooter parked nearby.
I'll find a phone in town and call for help.
But then he realized he had no phone to pay for the scooter.
It's all right,
replied an elderly man.
I'll pay for it. Thank you very much, replied George's driver happily. I'll pay you back.
You don't need to, replied the elderly man. I have such great respect for workers who mend our roads. Consider it as a thank you. The driver was happy with the elderly man's generosity, and after putting on a helmet, he zoomed away. He then found a telephone box and called for help. Butch came to pull him out. And Edward was called with a breakdown train and a well wagon to take him to Miss Jenny's yard in Titmouth. After George was placed onto the wagon, he looked towards the scooter and smiled.
You know, Miss Jenny was right,
he thought to himself.
That scooter did come in handy.